as provided by the voters without requiring proof of residence. The Commission welcomes the clarity which the Constitutional Court has provided in the ruling that the Electoral Commission is obliged to obtain sufficient particularity of the voter's address to enable it to ensure the voter is, at the time of registration, ordinarily resident in that voting district. The Commission recently met and determined that all certified voters' rolls for elections provided to contestants must in future contain address details where available as per requirement of the legislation. The Commission is also considering further measures governing elections to further reduce opportunities for irregular and fraudulent voting. These include possibly closing the voters' roll for a ward immediately when a vacancy arises. The Electoral Commission acknowledges that the responsibility for creating conditions for free and fair elections is shared by all key stakeholders, including the Electoral Commission, the political parties, independent candidates, civil societies, observers, and our electorate. Earlier this year, the Commission hosted a summit with represented political parties and a number of international delegates to explore ways of enhancing the conditions conducive to free and fair elections. This process is ongoing. The Commission therefore calls upon stakeholders to work together to ensure the legitimacy of all our elections. I thank you very much. This is a statement issued on behalf of the Electoral Commission.
Thank you so much, VC. I'm going to open the floor for questions. If you may please introduce yourself and then pose the question. I'm opening for the first 3 rounds of questions. Barry.
Good afternoon, Barry Bateman, Eyewitness News. The position adopted by the IEC here is that, we've had this Constitutional Court ruling, this is great, we've done a lot of stuff already in the background to address some of the concerns that were raised. Why did it have to take the candidates to go to the Constitutional Court for this to actually happen? Why did these people have to go through this exercise for the IEC to accept that there were problems? Thank you.
From ESCA. Just to follow up, this doesn't look very great for the IEC. Do you think that, the reputation they all have been tarnished by something like this? And just to go back to the policy adjustments that you have put in place, can you just give us exact detail, especially with regards to the even before it went to the court?
Constitutional Court. You recall that the first time when the Electoral Commission raised this issue was more than 2 years ago. It was in KwaZulu-Natal in Josini, after it came to attention that there were certain candidates and political parties who were unfortunately trying to influence the outcome of an election by busing people in the by-elections. We raised this issue with the political parties. We have raised these issues in Parliament. We have raised these issues in the National Party Liaison Committee to say the political parties must actually desist with this particular practice because it is affecting the credibility of our elections. So we have not only waited until now to deal with these particular issues, but also it is important that even following the Electoral Court judgment, we as the Electoral Commission again, we looked at all the issues that were being raised, and we said these are the kind of the measures that we should put in place. We did not only look at the fact that we had, or the judgment was in our favor at the Electoral Court level. We looked at the minority report, and we said, what are the kind of the issues that are emanating from the minority report which are relevant for the organization? So we have dealt with those issues. But also the seminar with the political parties on free and fair elections took place long before the judgment of the Electoral Court, let alone the Constitutional Court. The Constitutional Court only made its judgment today, and as I've indicated, the Commission has accepted it, and we will be implementing it. But there are quite a number of measures that we've put in place to make sure that we do not end up with this kind of difficulties. Now, there is a second question relating to the reputation of the Electoral Commission. Are we concerned as the Commission? I think it is important to indicate that it is not often that the commissioners, as the whole commission, they come to address a press conference. The fact that we are all here to address the press conference clearly indicates that we take the judgment very seriously. There are issues that are emanating from the judgment that are relevant for the organization that will help the organization to deal with these issues. But it is also important to indicate that those who drafted the legislation, they realized that to run an election, there will be errors. And then because there will be errors, there are certain instruments that have been put in place in order to deal with it. So the issue of the Electoral Court, which is in the legislation, as well as the Constitutional Court, are some of the remedies that people have if they are aggrieved by the decision of the Commission. So it is nothing untoward that people who are aggrieved will take the issues and use the instruments that are in the legislation in order for those issues to be addressed. So we are satisfied, but at the same time, we are saying it is important that once issues have been identified, once weaknesses have been identified, that we do every little thing to address those weaknesses to make sure that we can run a free and fair election or a credible elections, as we always say. The Deputy Chief Electoral Officer will deal with some of the policy adjustments that we've already put in place to deal with some of the weaknesses that we have already identified.
Thank you very much. I've deposed of the chairperson of the commission. It's a dangerous move. I think at the heart of the issue here, it's the fact that the Constitutional Court now wants us to have some sufficient particulars, and the language they use, sufficient particularity relating to an address. So we've got to implement that going forward. In other words, all other electoral events that we're going to hold, including for the preparation of the municipal elections in 2016, we will have to ensure that we collect an address with sufficient particularity. What that precisely means for a person who lives in an informal settlement or in a rural area, it's something that we have to sit and flesh out. That's one. Two, the court also says we need to provide political parties with a voters' roll with an address whenever those addresses are available. So one of the decisions of the Commission that has been taken ahead of this judgment is that we will hold registration weekends, but we will not proceed to proclaim the election date, or those that are entrusted that legal responsibility would not proceed to proclaim an election before we capture the addresses. We will then capture addresses and make available a voters' roll with addresses to political parties. Importantly, to enable parties to be able to campaign, because an address is necessary for purposes of campaigning. Those are some of the key initiatives that the Commission has already put in place to ensure that we address the issues that the court has identified.
I want to deal with the last issue that was raised. Can we trust that the IEC is going to have free and fair elections? Of course, we are very, very confident from our side. We will definitely have free and fair elections. But I want to draw you to what the judges in the Constitutional Court are saying about the notion of free and fair elections. They say there is no internationally recognized definition for free and fair elections, and that it is contextual, and that it involves value judgment. This is what the Constitutional Court judges are saying. And then they mention quite a number of other factors that are supposed to be taken in consideration in order to make sure that the elections are free and fair. From our side, we take in some of the issues that are emanating from the from the Constitutional Court as some of the elements that we should put in place in order to make sure that we've got free and fair elections. But that is not the only aspect that we are putting in place in order to make sure that we've got free and fair elections. Remember, in essence, the Constitutional Court dealt with the voters' roll. But the quality and the credibility of the elections is dependent on quite a number of other areas. For instance, the quality of our logistics, the quality of our electoral staff, and the political environment. These are some of the aspects that we are working very, very hard on to make sure that the environment within which we are operating is such that we can say the election is not only credible, but that it is free and fair and correctly reflects the will of the people.
Let me take the last round of questions. I think the first part has been dealt with sufficiently. Any other questions for clarity? Looks like we're good, huh?
Maybe,
okay.
Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry, okay.
Okay.
Maybe just to take us back to this 90-day time frame that has been given, is it too early to maybe find out
Any other question before we? All right. We look all right.
Can deal with 90-day, but the court judge down as an organization, we can do it. Obviously, as today, organization have a we're going to be dealing